Shin Megami Tensei is a franchise for those in the know that needs no introduction. But if you are one of the unenlightened, allow me to spread the good word. Shin Megami Tensei is the long-running JRPG franchise from Sega-owned developers ATLUS. It wouldn't be surprising to most familiar with the developer ATLUS to associate them with the Persona series, and for good reason too. The Persona series holds some of the best and most memorable JRPG experiences in gaming. For those who don't know, however, the Shin Megami Tensei franchise is actually the original franchise, with the Persona series being a spin-off. I mean, look at the cover art of Persona 3 Fest. It says Shin Megami Tensei right on it. 2021 was a big year for the Shin Megami Tensei franchise, as ATLUS released not only the somewhat questionable port of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne with the HD version, but also the highly anticipated new entry in the series, Shin Megami Tensei V. As a huge fan of the main Persona games you've probably heard of, I figured the best way to start this channel was to check out where the Persona series took its inspiration. Of course, I'll be playing on the Nintendo Switch, but it's worth noting that I am playing on an OLED Switch. However, there shouldn't be any technical differences between the two systems. Also, it's worth noting that there will be full spoilers for all the endings of Shin Megami Tensei V, so if you don't want to see any of the ways this game ends, please click off the video now and come back once you've played Shin Megami Tensei V for yourself. With all that out of the way, let's take a note from Shin Megami Tensei V's moniker and ascend, shall we? Shin Megami Tensei V starts off with some mysterious incidents happening around Juin High School that we are not quite aware of yet. The authorities of Juin High School advise our protagonist to take the buddy system on their way back to the dorms. Before walking away with his friends Tao Isinokami, Yuzuru Atsuta, and Miyazu Atsuta, our protagonist decides to go look for some stragglers and meets Ichiru Dazai, an outcast who's making a video discussing the mysterious incidents happening lately. When we find Dazai, the world starts to shake and we are transported to Dot, another world entirely, also commonly referred to as the Netherworld. As we come to grips with what just happened, we are ambushed by a group of monsters known as demons. Defenseless, it seems like this game is quickly coming to an end. Nope, because we are also approached by a strange man/being called Aogami. After explaining the situation to us, Aogami suggests fusing with us so we can defeat the attacking demons. So after some thinking, we decide to fuse with Aogami to become a being known as a Nahobino. Once we get our bearings, we continue to explore the mysterious Netherworld and run into two familiar faces along our way in Dazai and Yuzuru. Once we find both of them, we learn a little more of the Netherworld and head back home to Tokyo, where the plot truly starts. Initially, the game does a great job of setting things up. The story isn't too in your face, and after fusing with Aogami, you get a pretty big area to explore before teleporting back to the real world, so you're able to get a decent understanding of how the mechanics work to some extent. The first chunk of the Netherworld you explore is done very well in my opinion. Visually, the area looks stunning, and from a gameplay perspective, the game allows you to play around with what the game has to offer. It does what a brief intro should do, doesn't overwhelm you with story right out of the gate, and gives you a taste of what's to come, similar to Persona 5 after Joker initially awakes his persona. Playing it the first time, I could tell some of my brain receptors were tingling, as most of what I want from a good JRPG was demonstrated. But there's a whole lot more to this game besides the first area, so let me take you down the ley line crossing and let's talk about the gameplay. Now, as you can expect, Shin Megami Tensei is a JRPG down to its core. You have your party, you have your turn-based battles, and you have your navigation throughout the world. Standard stuff, right? Where Shin Megami Tensei V thrives, however, is in its interpretation of the JRPG formula. Let's start with Dot itself. There are 4 main areas, and visually speaking, each area of Dot looks incredible. You get this sense of wonder when stepping into Dot for the first real time, as well as when you unlock a new area. Usually, the first thing I ask myself in games is, how do I move? Luckily for us, the Nahobino moves around quite well through Dot, and I could tell ATLUS put a lot of work into making the Netherworld feel alive. Demons running around, having the ability to jump to do some light platforming from time to time, having a sprint button to run around more quickly so you can take the exploration at a faster pace. I really like just moving around in Dot. It never feels tedious to go from one point to another. The music to all of them typically tends to be this somber, calm melody that fits the visual look to the area, which only adds to that sense of immersion. Demons being out and about in the real world is a little surreal. Just walking around and seeing these small Kate Siths and Minato, and then moving on to Taito to find these giant Fafnirs shows how much ATLUS wanted to suck you into this world. Obviously, seeing monsters in an overworld area in a JRPG is nothing new, but something as small as making the demons true to size in the overworld made me want to explore every corner. Whether it be to attack the demon for experience or to recruit it to join my side, I want to see what that demon is capable of, which is something I wasn't expecting. When you think about fighting overworld demons, you probably associate it with grinding. And really, nobody likes grinding. But SMT5 makes grinding fun just due to being able to traverse the world at your own pace. I'm about to make a very weird comparison, and I'm sure this is probably one of many points where viewers click off the video, but stay with me here. You know what the 4 main areas of Dot remind me of? The original Jak and Daxter game. These areas being so wide and open and having the ability to be able to travel from each area without using the fast travel system reminds me so much of what the original Jak and Daxter did so well. Beyond these wide open areas, SMT5 also delivers traditional dungeon crawling. However, here's where I think the level design drops off a bit. Obviously, the dungeons themselves won't be as vast as the main areas of Dot, but I find them to be lacking in almost every regard. They're the one aspect of this game I feel is formulaic in terms of the game's level design. Some of them have some unique gimmicks that are fun to figure out, such as the Demon King's castle with the wall fan mechanic. Unfortunately, however, the longer I went through each dungeon, the more of a chore each dungeon became. Whether it be because the gimmick overstays its welcome like in the Demon King castle, or it's not used enough like in the Temple of Eternity, going through these dungeons is a slog. Maybe I'm just old school, but I prefer my dungeons to have puzzles as opposed to shoehorn gimmicks, but I can't fault ATLUS for trying. Having played a decent number of the other games they've made, I can certainly understand the ideas. I just think it wasn't well executed. Visually, I think they all look fine and the music is pretty good, but you don't get that same exhilaration feeling you would normally get exploring Dot. Now, all this comes at a cost, and unfortunately one I consider a cardinal sin: the cost of performance. This game chugs frequently, dropping from its intended 30 FPS while exploring Dot. I remember watching some of the pre-release stuff and noticing the game had some issues, but I didn't imagine it would be as rough as it is. There's also noticeable pop-in in almost every area, which immediately takes away that sense of immersion. Even in the menus, the frame rate drops! When transitioning into the main menu, there's a very noticeable frame drop, and with the transition itself looking pretty bad, it just makes going through the menus back and forth a poor experience. As someone who mainly plays most of his games on PC, this was definitely a problem at first, but luckily as the game sucked me in more, I was able to adjust and play through the game. Just note, this isn't going to be the smoothest experience out there. None of this detracts from what is otherwise a fantastic experience, but it's definitely something to know going into this adventure. I think now is a good place to start discussing the best aspect of this game in my opinion, Shin Megami Tensei V's combat system. Now, I am familiar with the mechanics of mainline Megaten games, but I should note, this is the first time I am playing a mainline SMT game. For those who don't, however, SMT5 takes the press turn battle system introduced in SMT3 Nocturne and implements it with one standout difference. The press turn system works like this. The icons at the top right of the screen determine how many turns you have, usually being limited to 1 per party member. Each time you take an action, one of the icons will disappear. When you attack the enemy in front of you with an element they are weak to, or you hit a critical attack, the icon you were on in the turn order will start flashing, which means you will get an extra turn. With this being my first experience with this system, I can say with confidence it's the ideal way to design a JRPG combat system. Obviously, this allows you to prolong your turn, but the brilliant part comes in what you do with those extra turns. Even on normal difficulty, the demons you'll fight are not stupid, and if you take them lightly, they will hurt you, so you need to constantly be thinking while you're playing. Sometimes you'll need to spend that extra turn healing your party to make sure you survive. Other times you might just want to go for the kill to end the battle. The risk-reward system ties in flawlessly with the press turn system of SMT5 because it gives you the full control of the fight without making the game mindless or easy. People get turned off to turn-based combat games just due to how repetitive they can feel, but Shin Megami Tensei V is an example of a game that does what every JRPG combat system should do, and that's give you options. When you can attack the same demon in different ways, it takes away that grindiness feeling. It makes you want to play the game more so you can figure out other potential combos against your adversaries. The main addition I alluded to earlier happens to be the new bar labeled Magatsuhi. To my knowledge, Magatsuhi in the lore of Shin Megami Tensei is a very important substance that isn't physically used in the games, rather being referred to as a powerful substance for world building. ATLUS decided to finally let you use some of the Magatsuhi you earn in combat directly. As you fight demons, you'll notice the bar will fill up at the end of your turn. When the bar gets full, you'll be able to use some special skills that will either buff your team, debuff the enemy team, or use a powerful attack to deal massive damage. Most likely though, you'll use the Omagatoki critical skill to make each of your attacks a critical attack. This is fine, but when you're using the same skill most of the time, it doesn't give any of the other skills that may even be exclusive to having a demon in your party a chance to thrive. If it wasn't obvious by this point, I really like the combat system of Shin Megami Tensei V. While I have no knowledge yet of its predecessors, I can, as someone who has played ATLUS JRPGs before, and other JRPGs as well, say this is one of the best combat systems ever. I just think when you understand how it works, it gives you all the chances to make a fight as easy or as hard as you want, and all I really want in a good combat system are options like I mentioned before. There's more to this game besides traversing and fighting, of course. Before we get into the story stuff, let me clean up the rest of the gameplay stuff and talk about the DLC Shin Megami Tensei V offers. In this game, the checkpoint/save spots are called ley line founts, and as you find more, you can fast travel between them if you need to get to a specific area by using the ley line crossing. Also within the ley line founts are various portals to other worlds where you can do different things. Let's start with the shop. If you hit the Cadaver's Hollow section, you'll be transported to a room filled with gold with this little green demon named Gustav. Gustav happened to find some wares we might find useful as we traverse Dot, so you can buy consumable items to use in battle or essences to build your Nahobino. Gustav also tasks you with finding these little creatures he had a system named Mimon. All you have to do is find one and talk to it, and you are rewarded with glory points, a currency that you can use to upgrade some of the Nahobino skills. It also allows you to gain discounts in some of the game's shops. Finding Mimon just adds to the fun of exploring Dot. You look in places you'd never think to, and platform across stuff you didn't even think was possible. My only problem is that there are a lot of them. I get it, lots of JRPGs have lots of collectibles, but the problem becomes finding all the Mimon with the map you have given to you. Not only did I use the Cheering Up to find all the Mimon's locations, but the last two don't even show up on my map. Seriously, I went back to each world and ran through to see if I could find them, but they were nowhere to be seen. I even looked online and couldn't find the answer I was looking for. I have heard people finding all the Mimon, so maybe I'm missing something, but by the time I was ready to finish the game, I didn't really care about the last two Mimon. I'm hoping all I missed were the items Gustav gives you after you found a certain amount of them, but I guess I won't know until I revisit this game in the future. One thing you might be wondering is how to get all these demons to join your side. That can be done in two ways. The first being to talk to them during combat, bringing back demon negotiation. It's usually more annoying than it's worth. Most of the time you need to guess what you're saying to continue the conversation, and when you get to the point where you can recruit them, they ask for health, Maka, or MP. I'm sure a veteran Shin Megami Tensei player will have some idea of what the demons respond best to, and there are some skills you can get that can make negotiating easier, but I don't really see the point in adding any extra skill when the system itself has some noticeable holes. The second way is of course Demon Fusion. The game's leyline founts also allow you to access the World of Shadows, where with the help of our attendant Maria, will also allow you to register your demons and fuse new ones. I find this to be a much more efficient way of getting demons. I would normally recruit demons I found in the overworld sections with negotiation to have them so I wouldn't have to fuse them. But when I wanted to get demons I would actually use for some of the game's harder fights, I would always grind some cash and fuse the demons I'd want. I'm a big fan of demon fusion in this game because similar to the combat system, you have lots of options at your disposal. Allowing me to fuse demons in multiple ways is one of the many smart features brought back from previous entries. Sure, it can be expensive from time to time, but when you get the demon you know will serve the role you need them to better than any demon you have at that point, makes all the grinding worth it. I want to take a second and talk about the DLC of SMT5 because it does tie in heavily when it comes to grinding. In SMT5 you can purchase DLC to add some side quests and some other stuff for the options, but for the low price of $2.99 each, you can purchase grinding specific DLC. Now, as a fan of these games, I of course did my research and figured out what the DLC does before I purchased it and realized it's a pretty game-breaking purchase. Buying the DLC makes it so the player can turn on a setting that makes more Mitama spawn in the overworld. Mitamas are these demons who have one affinity weakness, and upon figuring out what that weakness is and destroying the demon, you are either rewarded with items to get more glory, items that instantly level up both the Nahobino or your demons, and items that sell for a lot of Maka at the Cadaver's Hollow. I went ahead and made the purchase to see how much it affects the summon rate of Mitamas, and it is shameless. I mean, it's almost like every other demon is a Mitama. And you can find groups of Mitamas together! When I realized how it essentially changes the game's difficulty regardless of which one you're playing on, I quickly turned it off. Being able to essentially turn off grinding is a good accessibility feature for newer players, but ATLUS really didn't need to be as generous as it was with the spawn rate. Now, to be honest, I broke near the end of the game and turned on some of the DLC. The game itself isn't impossible, but if you want to get all the endings like I did, you're either going to be in this game a lot longer than I was, or you're buying the DLC. I turned it back on when the Nahobino was level 90, and only turned it back on so I can meet the side quest requirements to unlock the secret ending. I'll go more into that a little later, but I wanted to be clear that I did use the DLC to help me finish the game. I figured I owed you guys the truth if I was going to bash on how broken this DLC is. In terms of how much it costs, I didn't really give it too much thought. $9 for some game-breaking DLC is pretty cheap, to be honest. If you want the true Shin Megami Tensei V experience, then it goes without saying, you shouldn't use this DLC. But if you're like me who wanted to finish the game quickly and efficiently to get all the endings of the game, then it's not a terrible option. One purchase I did make but wasn't able to finish before this video released was the Return of the True Demon DLC. This brings back all the boss fights from SMT3 Nocturne, including an all-new Tough as Nails fight with the protagonist of said game, the Demi-Fiend. By this point, I've destroyed all the bosses leading up to the Demi-Fiend, but have not been able to beat him. I wanted to get this video out as soon as I got all the endings for the game, and the Demi-Fiend was not on my list of things to do. It's something I will return to, and if I do beat it, I'll make sure to at least stream it when I do it so nobody thinks I'm lying. That's pretty much everything I wanted to touch on from a gameplay standpoint. Overall, if you couldn't already tell, I really like Shin Megami Tensei V's gameplay. It has a few hiccups here and there, and I may have made them sound worse than they actually are, but most of what I critique doesn't detract from an otherwise great package. When you decide to commit 40 plus hours to a game, I feel you should be sure it's an experience you'll get a good time out of. Regardless of the story that's told in SMT5, the gameplay is so good that you should play it for that reason alone. And speaking of the story, let's finally transition and discuss what the hell's going on in this game's story. Once again, there will be full spoilers. I suggest clicking off the video if you don't want the endings of Shin Megami Tensei V spoiled for you. Once we return from the Netherworld, we are greeted by Abdiel, the Archangel of Bethel. Abdiel wants to destroy us on the account we have fused with Aogami to become a Nahobino, which is a direct violation of God's will. Tao intervenes and lies to Abdiel about our unshakable faith in God. Abdiel decides to table her quarrel with us for now so we can work together. We also meet Director Koshimizu, head of the Japan branch of Bethel, an organization consisting of humans and angels to protect God's will and defeat the Demon King Ariok. According to Koshimizu, the creator, or God in this instance, was murdered by the forces of chaos, so to protect humanity, the Nahobino joins up with Bethel to destroy the forces of chaos. We also learn that the Tokyo we live in was a gift from the creator, and the real Tokyo is actually the Netherworld. Now, there's a lot that happens in this game that leads us to the climax of the story, but honestly, it really isn't worth breaking down every little detail. So for the sake of pacing in the video, I'm not going to break down the plotline of every single major area in the game because really, not much happens. Instead, I'll talk about what I think the most important parts of the story are and go from there. After receiving our mission from Koshimizu, we return back to our normal school life until Koshimizu calls us in. While we wait, we meet Sahori Itsukishima, another student at Juin High School. We learn that Sahori is getting bullied by her classmates, and we hear a voice whisper to her to take action against those who are making her so miserable. This voice happens to be the demon Lamu. After some time and working on the mission, including saving some students who are abducted by demons and meeting a new friend Goko, we get a request from Tao to save Sahori from Lamu as Tao feels like she abandoned her friend. Lamu's goal is to fuse with Sahori for reasons that aren't quite apparent for now, to become a Nahobino like we are. Eventually, we find Sahori and Lamu, but before we can do anything, they fuse and Sahori gets her revenge on the bullies that harassed her by killing them. Once we arrive, Tao tries to reason with Sahori, but by this point Lamu has completely seduced her and they complete their fusion. Before we know it, Lamu attacks, and Tao sacrifices herself to save our life. Once we defeat the fused Lamu, you get the decision to spare or kill Sahori, and I decided to get rid of her so she could atone for what she did. I bring this part up because there's one crucial character in the scene that's important later on, but like I mentioned earlier, nothing really happens until the final area of the game. So let's get to where the story starts to get good. After defeating the Demon King Ariok and seemingly putting an end to chaos, Koshimizu discusses with his team that he intends to leave Bethel and explains that he is actually one of the Amatsukahi named Tsukuyomi. Koshimizu tells us with the throne now open for the taking and the fake Tokyo disappearing, he intends to fuse with the human who has his knowledge and save the fake Tokyo. Knowledge is explained like this. Before the creator took over and only one god ruled, the world was overrun with Nahobinos. The knowledge Koshimizu speaks of is the power that deities lost when the creator unfused all the Nahobinos. Koshimizu reveals that the human who has his knowledge is Yuzuru, and they decide when the time is right they will fuse into a Nahobino to save Tokyo. When we head into the meeting with all the leaders of Bethel, all the different leaders have different ideas of who should take the throne. Abdiel says they must preserve God's will, and to prove that she will destroy us, as our existence as a Nahobino is a direct violation of God's will. After defeating Abdiel, all the leaders officially disband Bethel and pursue the throne their own way. As everyone leaves to prepare for the upcoming battle for the throne, Dazai tells Abdiel that together they can save the world by preserving the world of law. Abdiel then reveals that Dazai is the human that holds her knowledge, and they pledge to come together and claim the throne. And this is where Dazai's character takes a huge nosedive. Throughout the story, Dazai shows that he admires Abdiel and truly believes that she's the person that can save the world. We see that he doesn't have a lot of confidence in himself and really relies on Abdiel's strength to persevere. He genuinely wants what's best for everyone, so I don't know why the writing team decided to transform him into an insufferable douchebag. He gets very arrogant and condescending, a stark contrast from the character we've seen up to this point. I think this is supposed to be him finally gaining the confidence he needs to see his ideal through, but man, I can't not hate this guy. Even while I was doing the law route, I just couldn't stand helping this guy. After Dazai turns into a dick, we hear a voice and they tell us to meet them on the roof of the dorm building. Once we do, we learn that Tao, although still deceased, is here to serve her role of guiding the new ruler she deems worthy through the Empyrean and to the throne. So at this point, all that's left is to collect the 3 keys and make our way through the Temple of Eternity so we can unlock the path to the Empyrean. Once we defeat Metatron, the Nahobino has a vision of the goddess telling us all the ideals of the major characters of the game. A mysterious voice, who happens to be Lucifer, the one who defeated the creator in the first place, asks us which ideal we want to see through, and this is where the story branches off into each ending of the game with their own exclusive assortment of boss fights. Keep that in mind when I talk about the actual boss fights. If you chose the law route, you make your way through the Empyrean and will fight Yuzuru and Koshimizu fused into the Nahobino, Tsukiyomi. After they kill Dazai and Abdiel with the force of their Nahobino transformation, Dazai asks us to see God's will through. After defeating Tsukiyomi, he congratulates his brother Aogami and we ascend to the throne room to find Goko, who tells us he will fulfill his role regardless of who claims the throne. We are then approached by Yakumo and Nuwa. Oh yeah, these guys. These guys are probably the 2 worst characters of the game. Yakumo and Nuwa are Shin Megami Tensei V's neutral representatives, and honestly, they're not in the story enough to justify their representation. We barely see them, and most of the time we do, we end up fighting them, so honestly, I couldn't think of a better time to talk about them other than now. Yakumo hates gods and demons, and wants humans to fight for themselves and to destroy the throne to get rid of gods and demons. Nuwa is honestly just there. Couldn't really tell you why she's hanging around. Ironically enough, Nuwa and Yakumo fuse into a Nahobino, completely contradicting Yakumo's visceral hatred for gods and demons. And after quickly defeating them, we ascend to our throne with the help of Goko and the goddess. Before we can recreate the world and preserve God's will, Lucifer again whispers to the Nahobino to explain that the world we create will end eventually, and if he wants to prevent the impending doom, to meet him at the plane of existence that exceeds the earth and the heavens. When we meet Lucifer, he tells us that we needed to defeat him in combat to bring an end to the never-ending cycle that was put in place called the Mandala system. Once we defeat Lucifer, the Nahobino creates the world to preserve God's will. The Nahobino then walks towards his new world, and Goko explains that in the Age of Law we saved everyone who died, and that even if it's a past memory, the people accept the miracle ignorantly. We sit atop our throne and look at our work proudly. So yeah, pretty much every ending after this plays out the exact same way, just with different boss fights, so let's quick fire these last 3 and get out of here. If you choose the Chaos route, you'll fight Abdiel and Dazai after they fused into a Nahobino, which sees Yuzuru and Koshimizu being killed due to the intensity of the transformation. Like I said, things are pretty similar besides who you fight. After defeating the fused Abdiel, they both die and we ascend the throne, and like before, Goko tells us he doesn't care who gets the throne. We fight fused Nuwa again, and after this have the same boss fight with Lucifer, with each of them saying the same things they say in the Law route. Once we defeat Lucifer, Goko tells us that the Nahobino created the world of myriad gods, where the people choose who to commit to. In this world, however, people lack conviction and lose their way so much that a conflict of ideologies breaks out. The Nahobino looks down sadly, but is firm in his decision. If you choose the neutral route, you first fight fused Abdiel, who in her transformation kills Yakumo, but not Nuwa. After Yakumo dies, Nuwa teleports away and we do battle with Abdiel. Upon her defeat, we ascend to the throne to carry out Yakumo's ideal and fight Tsukiyomi. This is the only ending in SMT5 that doesn't have a secret fight with Lucifer. Once we defeat Tsukiyomi, we go ahead and destroy the throne. Upon destroying the throne, a battle between demons and humans ensues, and despite the odds, humanity did defeat the demons by seizing the power of knowledge and creation. Now if you go the extra mile and meet the quest requirements, which includes a hard-ass boss fight against Shiva, you can unlock the secret ending. The secret ending of SMT5 is a branching path from the neutral ending. Everything plays out the same until after the fight with Abdiel before ascending to the throne. In this ending, Nuwa will come back after transporting away and reveals her true plan she and Yakumo had if they claimed the throne. Their world was to create a world designed only for humans, a world where no gods or demons exist. When we ascend to the throne room, we fight Tsukiyomi. Once defeated, we are again given a choice, to destroy the throne or create a world for humanity only. If you choose to create a world for humanity, you get the true final boss of SMT5, a 3-phase boss fight with Lucifer explaining pretty much what he does in the other routes. Once we defeat Lucifer, we head back to the throne room and say goodbye to Aogami as we create a world without demons and gods, a world created for humans only. We then cut away to the Nahobino walking towards the world, and your extra effort is rewarded with a secret cutscene of the protagonist walking with his friends in the train station. As this is happening, Goko is narrating and says the Nahobino created a new world order, but asks if the world can exist without the Mandala system and without gods and demons. The game ends with a shot of the ruler of this new age observing to keep things in order. As you can probably tell with this abridged version of the story, I wasn't a huge fan of the narrative of this game. I think it has some pretty cool ideas, and for a little bit has some interesting characters, but these ideas and characters aren't well executed. This isn't your typical narrative with a main hero and a main villain. Your interpretation of the narrative decides who your adversary is. Instead of it being focused on one character, you're more so experiencing the narrative of the world, and the protagonist is our conduit for the exploration. Not giving Yuzuru any sort of character development and completely changing Dazai's character are just a few examples of where this game's narrative falls flat. And now finally, this completes Shin Megami Tensei V. If you saw the title of this video, you'll notice I used the phrase ascends a genre. That's because when I think this game hits its highs, it really does ascend the JRPG genre forward. Even though for the most part the story falls flat for me, I can't speak highly enough of this game's combat system. I feel in total control when the enemy has the advantage, and I'm given the tools to beat my enemy in any way that I want. There's no end to the combination of demons you can use, so changing up my party also kept the combat feeling fresh. Navigating through Dot is a joy, and truly where I feel SMT5 ascends the JRPG genre, because Atlus took the world and tried as much as possible to make the world feel alive. Having the Nahobino feel as good as he does to move around makes you want to see every corner of every area, and while I can't say the same for the main dungeons of the game, I still feel the gimmicks work to some degree. In a post-Persona 5 world, JRPGs are always going to be scrutinized more closely, so I'm glad to see Atlus deliver another classic. And with Shin Megami Tensei V becoming the fastest selling game in the franchise, it's safe to assume we'll be seeing more entries in the future. If you made it this far, I want to first and foremost thank you for taking the time to watch. I want to shout out my buddy Max who made the thumbnail for this video, and my buddy Mike who inspired me to get this channel started. I'm not 100% sure when the next video will be out, but I can say it'll be on Yakuza Like a Dragon. I'm starting my Yakuza look through with the latest entry because it's the first mainline Yakuza game I've ever played, and I think I can offer a unique perspective with this in mind. So if you're interested in that, hit the subscribe bell, and if you like what you saw in this video, I hope you'll hit the thumbs up button for me. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace.